Part 6, Chemical and Mechanical Digestion. In the previous 5 parts, I discussed about the structure of the gastrointestinal tract. In this part, I will discuss the role of each part in the mechanical as well as chemical digestion of food. This will also discuss the mode of absorption of various nutrients. Digestion describes the process by which complex dietary substances are converted into simple forms that can be absorbed by the body. The first part in the gastrointestinal tract is the mouth. This is where we take the food in. The mechanical digestion in the oral cavity consists of grinding of food into smaller pieces by the teeth, a process called mastication. There are different types of teeth in the mouth, which was discussed in the first part, which helps in the different processes in mechanical digestion, like cutting, tearing, chewing, etc. In the mouth, there are 3 major salivary glands. They are parietal gland, sublingual gland, submandibular gland. This saliva secreted by these glands contain mucus that moistens food and buffers the pH of the food so that the enzymes can act on them. Saliva also contains immunoglobulins and lysozymes, which have antibacterial action to reduce tooth decay by inhibiting growth of some bacteria. And also the food we intake contain many microorganisms that can also be killed or suppressed. Their growth is suppressed by these immunoglobulins and lysozymes. Chemical digestion in the mouth is very small or minor. Is made possible by the salivary amylase, that is ptyalin or alpha amylase, and lingual lipase, both contained in the saliva. Salivary amylase is chemically identical to pancreatic amylase and digests starch to maltose and maltotriose, working at a pH optimum of 6.7 to 7. So this will break the starch into maltose and maltotriose. Lingual lipase, that is another enzyme found in the saliva, secreted by the cells of the tongue. This hydrolyzes the ester bonds in triglycerides to form diacyl glycerol and monoacyl glycerols. After sufficient digestion in the oral cavity, partially digested food or bolus is swallowed into the esophagus. No digestion occurs in the esophagus. It just transfers the food from the mouth to the stomach. And lipase, that is a lingual lipase secreted by the or produced by the cells of the tongue, is active in the mouth as well as in the stomach, especially the upper part of the stomach, the fundus. Here the ester linkage is broken down by the lipase and the free fatty acid, two monoglycerides and a free fatty acid is produced. Digestion. So in the stomach, mechanical as well as chemical digestion takes place. So when the food is pushed into the esophagus by the action of deglutition, and from there it moves to the stomach, it reaches the upper part of the stomach. When food reaches the stomach, the muscular layer of the stomach wall, known as the muscularis, undergoes regular rhythmic contractions that help mix the food with the gastric secretions to speed up the process of chemical digestion. The muscularis consists of the same circular longitudinal and oblique layers. The oblique layers are not present in other part of the gastrointestinal tract. That is a peculiarity of the stomach. These three layers of muscles allow the stomach to perform the various turning motions that are essential for efficient mechanical digestion. So this causes vigorous churning motions that breaks the food into smaller particles. And gradually, the solid pieces of food are mechanically and chemically digested, resulting in a semi-solid, thick and soupy material called chyle. Depending on the nature of the food typically remains in the stomach for 3 to 6 hours. Meals rich in protein and fat, such as fried items, tend to stay in the stomach for a longer period, while carbohydrate-rich foods, such as fruits, baked potato, tend to pass through much faster because the digestion is faster in the case of carbohydrate. The stomach has the ability to expand or contract depending upon the amount of food contained within it. Its structure is very suitable for that purpose. As discussed in previous parts, the stomach contains a lot of invaginations in the walls that help in its expansion. The stomach has the ability to expand or contract depending upon the amount of food contained within it. When contracted, the interior walls form numerous folds, rugae. So many folds are produced in the stomach when there is not enough much food in that, which disappear when the walls are distended, or that is when the stomach is filled with food. This helps in accommodating the food entering the stomach. The contractions of the stomach that causes the mechanical digestion. 3 types of motor activity is observed. These movements helps in the mechanical digestion of the food materials. In the mixing of stomach content with the secretions in stomach, then mechanical digestion and the gradual movement of food through the stomach into the duodenum is aided by these 3 types of motor activity. The first is a small contraction wave of the stomach wall that originates in the upper part of the stomach and slowly moves down over the organ towards the pyloric sphincter. The first contraction is a slow contraction, starts from the upper part and slowly moves towards the pylorus. This type of contraction produces a slight indentation, slightly moves in the wall. Retrograde waves. So this contraction moves down. At the same time, the waves from the pyloric region, the retrograde waves, frequently seep from the pyloric sphincter to the antrum. This is the antral region, and up to its junction with the body of the stomach. So the smooth contractions are coming from the top part. At the same time, another retrograde contraction starts from the pyloric sphincter and moves up to the pylorus, to the antrum, and to the junction of the antrum with the body of the stomach. So these 2 contractions press the food harshly. This also causes mechanical digestion. This also causes the mixing of the contents, which aids in the chemical digestion. The second type of motor activity is also a contracting wave, but it is peristaltic in nature. The contraction originates in the upper part of the stomach as well as is slowly propagated over the organ towards the pyloric sphincter. This type of gastric contraction produces a deep indentation in the wall of the stomach. So the previous one was a bit milder, but this one produces deep indentation. So the wall goes quite lot inside. As the peristaltic wave approaches the antrum, the indentation completely obstructs the stomach lumen. So this peristaltic movement going down, the indentation is deep, and as it reaches here, the lumen is completely blocked so that the food cannot go back, and it increases the pressure there. This causes sort of pumping action for emptying the contents of the stomach into the duodenum. the pyloric sphincter opens slightly and a small part of the digested or partially digested food is moved into the duodenum. So the mechanical digestion, if we say in detail, when the food enters the stomach, mixing waves begin to occur at intervals of approximately 20 seconds. So each of the previously said described wave occurs at an interval of 20 seconds. Is a unique type of peristalsis that mixes and softens food with the gastric juices to create chyme. The initial mixing waves are relatively gentle. As the time passes, it becomes more intense. The pylorus, which holds around 30 ml of chyme, so the pylorus region, it holds about 30 pylorus region holds about 30 ml of chyme, acts as a filter, permitting only liquid and small food particles to pass through the pyloric sphincter. So this is a pyloric sphincter. This holds around 30 ml, and the only liquid and small food particles pass through the partially opened pyloric sphincter to the duodenum. If the food is released in larger quantity, it will upset the duodenal region because it can hold only a small amount of food, and also the food coming into the duodenum from the stomach is highly acidic. So if large quantity is released, it will damage the wall of the duodenum. So the presence of chyme in the duodenum activates receptors that inhibits gastric secretion. This prevents additional chyme from being released by the stomach before the duodenum is really empty to accept the next batch of chyme. Food bolus, which consists of chewed up food from the mouth and esophagus, is processed by the stomach into chyme, which is partially digested food that is more readily absorbable as nutrients in the small intestine. The stomach accomplishes this food processing through forceful back and forth churning, as described before, by the inner oblique layer of muscularis externa. The circular and longitudinal layers facilitate gastric emptying. So the three layers of muscles have different functions. The contraction of the stomach wall, aiding mechanical digestion, is done by the longitudinal, the oblique muscles. The circular and longitudinal muscles help in the movement of the food and gastric emptying. Chyme that is not emptied will continue to churn in the stomach until it can pass through the pyloric sphincter. So only a small part of the chyme is passed to the duodenum. The rest will go back into the body of the stomach and get churned. Concentration of gastric smooth muscles are higher in the body part, and this they cause contractions which aid in the mechanical digestion. The contractions of the gastric smooth muscles are generated by stimuli. They are generated in the meandric interstitial cells of Kagel. Meandric interstitial cells of Kagel are present in the contractions are, or the impulses are generated there, so they act as gastrointestinal pacemakers. So the epithelial, this is a wall of the stomach, epithelial layer, the wall in the stomach and as well as intestine. Then lamina propria, then muscularis mucosa. So there the muscular submucosal plexus is there. In the circular muscles, immersed in the circular muscles, you can see this interstitial cells of Kagel. And also in the meandric plexus, we can see another set of interstitial cells of Kagel, that is IZZ-MY, that is in the meandric plexus. This is IZZ-IM, that is the intramuscular. They act as pacemakers. So from the stomach, food enters the duodenum. But in the stomach, the chemical digestion is aided by the secretions. The thick mucous membrane lining of the wall densely packed with the small gastric glands. These secrete a mixture of enzymes and hydrochloric acid. that partly digest proteins and fats. The secretion of gastric juice is controlled by both nerves and hormones. Stimuli originating in the brain, stomach, and small intestine activates or inhibit gastric juice production, depending upon the need. When the food is entering, more gastric juice is produced. By the time the digestion is completed, the production is inhibited. These stimuli are initiated by one in a succeeding order in three phases of gastric secretion. They are called the cephalic secretion phase, gastric phase, and intestinal phase. However, once gastric secretion begins, all the three phases can occur simultaneously. The cephalic phase is also called a reflex phase. This is a relatively short phase. It takes place before food enters the stomach. The smell, taste, sight, or thought of food triggers this phase. And the impulses are going through the cerebral cortex to the hypothalamus to the vagus nerve and stimulates the gastric secretion. So the sight, smell, or thought is enough. So you can, so that if you know the taste of this tamarind by the sight, or even just thought of it causes a production of a large lot of saliva. You might have experienced that. Along with that, gastric juice secretion is also started. So this enhanced secretion is a conditioned reflex, meaning it occurs only if you like or want a particular food. Depression and loss of appetite can suppress the cephalic phase, like loss of appetite, depression, the impulses going through cerebral cortex, lack of stimulation to parasympathetic center, and inhibit gastric secretion. Then the gastric phase. This lasts 3 to 4 hours, so long as the food is in the stomach. Local neural and hormonal mechanisms triggered by the entry of food into the stomach stimulate the secretion. The food that reaches the stomach creates distension that activates the stretch receptors. So food reaching the stomach, it creates distend the stomach wall. So the stretch receptors are activated. Parasympathetic neurons are stimulated to release acetylcholine, which then provokes increased secretion of gastric juice. Partially digested protein and rising pH extra stimulates the release of gastrin from the endocrine G cells. So this release of gastrin is happening that can also control the stretching of the stomach wall, activate the stretch receptors, reflex to the medulla, to the vagus nerve, and stimulates the gastric secretion. Chemicals in food and rising pH activates chemoreceptors of stomach. G cells secretes gastrin into blood. This gastrin also stimulates gastric phase. Then high acidity, that pH is less than 2 of stomach content. So enough hydrochloric acid is there. Then reduction in the secretion of the gastrin by G cells, it causes inhibition. And emotional distress, that is activation of sympathetic nervous system, overrides parasympathetic control and inhibition of the gastric secretion. Then the intestinal phase. When the partially digested food enters the duodenum, the intestinal mucosa cells release a hormone called intestinal, that is enteric gastrin, which further excites gastric juice secretion. This stimulation of gastric secretion is only for a short period of time. When the intestine is distended with chyme, the enterogastric reflex inhibits secretion of gastric juice. Presence of hypertonic chyme also produce inhibitory stimuli. So the intestinal phase is a short duration. pH and partially digested food in the duodenum. So when the food is partially digested, that means it needs to be there in the stomach for a longer period of time and more enzymes and acid is needed. So it causes the release of intestinal gastrin into the blood circulation that stimulates gastric secretion. When digested food is moving into the duodenum, it causes the distension of the duodenum, and also fatty and acidic and hypertonic kind, and also the presence of irritants stimulates enterogastric reflex, which leads to the inhibition of the secretory activity of stomach. As in the previous case, distension of duodenum, partially digested food, acidic and fatty food. This also causes the release of intestinal hormones, secretin, gastric inhibitory peptide, cholecystokinin, vasoactive intestinal peptide. They also inhibit the secretory activity of stomach. So hydrochloric acid. The main constituent of gastric juice is secreted by the parietal cells. The hydrogen and chloride components of HCl are secreted separately by hydrogen or potassium ATPase pumps and chloride channels in the stomach. So when there is too much of loss in the water through diarrhea or something like that, when intervention is needed, inhibition of acids, when people have acidic responses. So intervention of acid secretion to avoid various complications of excess acid is commonly done by administering proton pump inhibitors, because this acid secretion happens through the proton pumps like hydrogen potassium ATPase pumps and chloride channels. When they are inhibited, their secretion will be inhibited and HCl production is also inhibited. The fundus plays an important role in the digestion by temporarily storing undigested food. So from the esophagus, the food reaches the fundus, the top part of the stomach. This temporarily store the food there. And also the gases produced in the stomach is also stored because the gas goes up. So this is the top part of the stomach. While the food is in the fundus, the pH is not that low because acid is not much added into the food. So the pH is higher. As a result, lingual lipase can still act on the food. Then later what happens is the mixing waves incorporate this food with the chyme. This decreases the pH and the acidity inactivates salivary amylase and the lingual lipase. So lingual lipase, the action of these two enzymes also continue in the fundus until the food is fully mixed with the gastric juice. Then the next part of digestion. So the chemical digestion in stomach, gastrin, histamine, prostaglandins, somatostatin, gastric inhibitory polypeptide, secretin, and the vagus nerve. It induces acid secretion. Then pepsinogen is an inactive enzyme, is converted to pepsin, and pepsin breaks proteins into smaller peptides. And also this acid denature protein and kill microbes. This denatured protein can be easily digested in the intestine, the duodenum. The stomach food reaches the fundus, the storage of gas as well as food. So when the food is in fundus, salivary amylase and lingual lipase can act on it because the pH is not that low there. So pepsinogen is a proenzyme of pepsin. Is secreted by the chief cells. The acidic environment created by the gastric juice activates the conversion of pepsinogen into pepsin. Pepsin breaks down proteins into smaller peptides, which may be further processed and later absorbed in the small intestine. The secretion of acid is regulated by both hormonal and neural components, including gastrin, histamine, prostaglandin, somatostatin, gastric inhibitory polypeptide, secretin, and the vagus nerve. The acidic environment of the stomach is not only useful for protein denaturing, but also for protection against potentially infectious agents, because the food remains in the stomach for a longer period of time. During this period of time, the bacteria can multiply. So this multiplication is inhibited by killing them or by suppressing the division. So this is an important defense mechanism against microbes. Additional secretory cells of the gastric glands include foveolar cells and endocrine cells. Foveolar cells protect the stomach from the corrosive nature of its acidic environment by producing mucus and bicarbonate. When the acidity is too high, bicarbonate will be released. This helps to reduce the acidity. Endocrine cells secrete various digestive hormones such as gastrin, somatostatin, and ghrelin. Gastrin is released in response to increased gastric distension, as I said before, increased gastric pH, and the presence of amino acids in the stomach. Then absorption. Alcohol is directly absorbed in the stomach. Stomach is actually not a major area of nutrient absorption. There is minimal absorption of the initial products of protein digestion, and it is generally thought that digested fat is not absorbed in the stomach. However, simple sugars such as glucose, galactose, and fructose are readily absorbed, particularly when in high concentration. That is why glucose consumption helps you quickly come out of tiredness due to increased physical activity. The stomach is excellent at absorbing water. Taking approximately 20 minutes to absorb 50% of the ingested volume of water. This will help in decreasing the volume of the stomach content, which will help to prevent the digestive enzymes getting diluted. And this is why we are advised to take less amount of water along with the food. Because if you are taking too much water along with the food, the digestive enzymes get diluted and their activity will be decreased. The stomach has its own arrangements to absorb around 50% of the water in the first 20 minutes. So ethanol present in alcoholic beverages is also absorbed by the stomach. That is why the alcohol consumption gives a quick kick. Hunger and satiety. When the stomach is empty, the PD1 cells, these cells, of the gastric pits release the peptide hormone ghrelin. This is also called hunger hormone. This circulates in the blood and interacts with the receptors in the hypothalamus and other regions of the brain to promote powerful sensations of hunger. So ghrelin levels increase as the time progresses after a meal, reaching a peak concentration in the blood before breakfast, lunch, and dinner. On eating food, stretching out the stomach wall inhibits the release of ghrelin by these P or D cells, and the sensation of hunger is reduced. Different hormones are involved in the sensation of satiety, feeling full and satisfied after eating food. Then the movement of chyme into the duodenum. The pylorus connects the stomach directly to the duodenum, which forms the first segment of the small intestine, the duodenum. At regular intervals, typically every 20 seconds, the pyloric sphincter, that is a small circular muscular layer, as we learned in the previous part, dilates to allow small portion of the acidic chyme to pass into the duodenum. This slow, gradual release of chyme allows time for the acidic contents of the stomach to be neutralized by alkaline pancreatic juice before they reach the small intestine. This helps to protect the delicate mucosa of the intestine from chemical damage and also provide the right pH for the enzymes of the small intestine to act on the food. As the stomach progressively empties, the elastic recoil of its walls allow it to shrink back to its pre-meal volume. An empty stomach will begin to undergo gentle contractions. And if no food is forthcoming, waves of contraction can intensify, which is perceived as hunger pangs. The pyloric sphincter which separates the stomach and duodenum, periodically opens to release small portions of acidic chyme. The sudden increase in acidity stimulates the release of several hormones, which include secretin, vasoactive intestinal peptide, cholecystokinin, gastric inhibitory peptide. So these hormones have specific function. Secretin is a peptide hormone comprising around 27 amino acids. It's secreted by the endocrine S cells of the duodenum and jejunum. It stimulates the production and release of bicarbonate ions by the pancreas. So when the acidity is high, this secretion will happen and it stimulates the pancreas to release more bicarbonate ions. These accumulates in the pancreatic juice, giving it an alkaline pH of around 8 to 8.6. This helps to neutralize the acidic chyme, which prevent the damage to the intestinal wall as well as provide the right pH for the pancreatic enzyme. Cholecystokinin. CCK exists in several forms with a number of amino acids ranging from 4 to 83. It is released by the endocrine I cells of the duodenum. So it is a protein, a polypeptide made up of different numbers of amino, different types of CCKs are there. Somehow only 4 amino acids, some others are 83 amino acids. CCK has got multiple functions in the body. It helps inhibit gastric emptying, is prevent the overfilling of duodenum, stimulate the production of pancreatic enzymes, stimulate the contraction of the smooth muscle wall of the gallbladder, and help in the release of bile, relaxes the sphincter of Oddi, that is the opening, the sphincter at the opening of the common bile duct. It allows the bile and pancreas juice to be released into the duodenum. Enhances the activity of Brunner's gland, increasing their output of bicarbonate-rich secretions. Reduces sensation of hunger, together with other hormones such as pancreatic polypeptide. Then gastric inhibitory polypeptide, synthesized by the endocrine K cells of the duodenum and jejunum. GIP is a polypeptide comprising around 42 amino acids. As its name suggests, GIP inhibits the release of gastric secretions in the stomach, helping to avoid damage to the small intestine. It also promotes the release of insulin by the beta cells of the pancreas. Because when the food is digested, a lot of glucose monosaccharides are absorbed in the blood that need to be managed. So insulin is produced. Vasoactive intestinal peptide. VIP is a neuropeptide consisting of 28 amino acids and produced by the nerve cells throughout the gastrointestinal tract. Its role is poorly understood, but it is thought to regulate the composition of pancreatic juice and bile, as well as blood flow in gut tissue. The mechanical digestion in the small intestine. The movement of intestinal smooth muscles include both segmentation and a form of peristalsis. So migrating motility complexes are formed. If you can see the intestine when it was going through the segmentation, it would look as if the contents were being pushed roughly and incrementally back and forth. So the contractions in this intestinal wall push the content forward as well as backward. So the contraction is progressing all over the small intestine. So this push the food forward and backward. This is not causing the movement of food to the next part of the intestine, but this is mainly for mixing with the juices, and also it brings the food closer to the small intestinal mucosa so that nutrients can be absorbed. So the movement, the first movement, the contraction is here. The second, the contraction will be further down. Third, the contraction will be further down. So each part of the intestine is contracted in subsequent cycles. As a result, the whole food in the intestine will be mixed with the juices, and also it comes in contact with the wall, so that the nutrients can be absorbed. So the duodenum mucosa secretes the hormone motilin, which initiates peristalsis in the form of migrating motility complex. These complexes, which begin in the duodenum, force chyme through a short section of the small intestine and then stop. The next contraction begins a little bit farther, as I said before. Contraction here, next contraction a little farther down, next further down. Then the first forces chyme a bit further through the small intestine, then stops. These complexes move slowly down the small intestine, forcing the chyme on the way, taking around 90 to 120 minutes to finally reach the end of the ileum. At this point, the process is repeated, starting from the duodenum. The ileocecal wall, a sphincter, usually constrictor state, the wall separating the ileum from the cecum. When the motility complex reaches, ileum increases its motility. This sphincter relaxes, allowing food residue to enter the first portion of the large intestine, the cecum. Relaxation of ileocecal sphincter is controlled by both nerves and hormones. First, digestive activity in the stomach provokes the gastroileal reflex, which increases the force of ileal segmentation. Second, the stomach releases the hormone gastrin, which enhances ileal motility, thus relaxing the ileocecal sphincter. After chyme passes through, backward pressure helps close the sphincter. So this gastroileal reflex pushes the chyme into the cecum. Once the chyme is into the cecum, the reverse pressure closes the sphincter, or the backward pressure closes the sphincter. This prevents the backflow of food into the intestine from the cecum. Because of this reflex, the first intake is completely emptied from the stomach and intestine by the time the next intake of food happens. It takes about 3 to 5 hours for all chyme to leave small intestine. So in the small intestine, the food is moving very slowly. It helps to adjust the pH. And also it helps in the digestion by the enzyme. The enzymes get longer time to get digestion. And it also helps in the proper absorption of food material. In the small intestine, the digestion takes place in the lumen as well as on the cells of the villi. The partially digested food is entering. The protein in there that is acted on by intestinal peptide. The digestion of protein and carbohydrates, which partially occurs in the stomach, is completed in the small intestine with the aid of intestinal and pancreatic juices. Lipids arrive in the intestine largely undigested. So much of the focus here is on lipid digestion. So the protein and carbohydrates digestion is nearing completion. Lipid majority is undigested. So the lipid digestion has got importance in the intestine. Intestinal juice combines with the pancreatic juice to provide a liquid medium that facilitates absorption. The intestine is also where most water is absorbed via osmosis. The small intestine's absorptive cells also synthesize digestive enzymes and then place them in the plasma membrane of the microvilli. That is why the digestion takes place on the cell also, not only in the lumen. This distinguishes the small intestine from the stomach. The stomach digestion is happening only in the lumen. That is, enzymatic digestion occurs not only in the lumen but also on the luminous surface of the mucosal cells. For optimal chemical digestion, chyme must be delivered from the stomach slowly in small amounts. This is because chyme from the stomach is typically hypertonic, and if large quantities were forced at once into the small intestine, the resulting osmotic water loss from the blood because the hypertonic food is inside the duodenum, then water will move from the blood into the duodenum. This will result potentially as life-threatening low blood volume. In addition, continued digestion requires an upward adjustment of the low pH of stomach chyme, along with vigorous mixing of the chyme with bile and pancreatic juices helps this. Both processes take time, so the pumping action of the pylorus must be carefully controlled so prevent the duodenum from being overwhelmed with chyme. Brush border of the cells contain a number of enzymes. They are maltase, that is breaks down disaccharides into two molecules of glucose. Sucrase breaks sucrose into glucose and fructose. Lactase breaks lactose into glucose and galactose. Intestinal lipase fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Intestinal peptidase completes protein digestion by digesting peptides into their amino acids. So the accessory glands in the stomach, the liver and pancreas help in the digestion. Liver secretes bile, as we said before. It helps to neutralize the content in the duodenum and helps in the action of the protein digesting as well as lipid digesting enzymes. Pancreas has got two parts, exocrine as well as endocrine part. So the pancreatic enzymes. So the chemical digestion in the duodenum is helped by pancreatic enzymes. So the liver, the secretion of the liver helps in the digestion. Liver produces bile. The liver is the largest internal organ of the human body. It weighs around 1.3 kilograms in women and 1.8 kilograms in men. Liver is located in the upper right quadrant of the abdomen, just below the diaphragm. Bile produced by the liver is concentrated and stored in the gallbladder. In a healthy person, the liver releases around 600 ml of bile into the duodenum each day. This is done in small amounts as the gallbladder contracts in response to cholecystokin. Then pancreas and pancreatic juice production. The pancreas is a small elongated gland around 15 centimeters long and weighing around 100 grams. It is located in the loop of the duodenum and is covered by the lower portion of the stomach. The endocrine portion of the pancreas consists of tiny clusters of cells called islets of Langerhans. These are the endocrine part which produces insulin, which produce several key hormones involved in controlling blood sugar levels and regulating appetite. The digestive portion of the pancreas, that is the exocrine part, that is takes up around 80% of the organ. These are all exocrine portion. They are called acini. It consists of thousands of acini, small berry-like structure that secretes pancreatic juice into the tiny ducts. These tiny ducts join together and form the central pancreatic duct. So these small ducts they join together and forming the central pancreatic duct. These tiny joints together and forms the central pancreatic duct. The central pancreatic duct fuses with the common bile ducts before entering the duodenum at the major duodenal papilla. So that is opening of the common bile duct into the duodenum. Around 1 to 2.5 liters of pancreatic juice is produced each day by an adult pancreas. The pancreatic juice consists mostly of water, bicarbonate ions, pancreatic enzymes. One of its key roles is neutralize acidity in the chyme, coming through from the stomach. This is essential to prevent autodigestion of the stomach and intestinal wall and prevent ulceration. So pancreatic enzymes. So pancreatic lipase is the most active of the gut lipases. Like salivary and gastric lipases, it breaks down triglyceride fats into fatty acids and glycerol, working mostly on the emulsified fat droplets created by bile cells. For maximal activity on fat droplets, this fat is emulsified by the bile cells. Pancreatic lipase requires the presence of small protein coenzyme colipase. So this small protein enhances the activity of the pancreatic lipase. And this is also produced by the pancreas. Then pancreatic amylase. Carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth with the salivary amylase. Like salivary amylase, pancreatic amylase attacks the glycosidic bonds between adjacent glucose molecules in the polysaccharide, breaking down starch into maltose. Catalyzes starch digestion in the duodenum lumen. It is also called luminal amylase. Pancreatic amylase can function over a broad pH range, neutral to alkaline pH. Amylases are most efficient in an environment with a neutral to alkaline pH. The activity of salivary amylase slows down in the acidic environment of the stomach. But the enzymatic digestion of carbohydrates resumes in the alkaline environment of the duodenum. Mucosal enzymes, amylase, sucrase, and isomaltase are responsible for the final digestion of into glucose. So the polysaccharides, for example, starch, the amylase is acting on it. Disaccharides are produced on the disaccharides. So on sucrose, sucrase is acting. Maltose, maltase is acting. Lactose, lactase is acting. Sucrose is broken down into glucose and fructose. Maltase into two molecules of glucose and lactase into glucose and galactose. Then protein digestion in pancreas. This is done by pancreatic proteases. Actually, protein digestion starts in the stomach, whereas carbohydrate and lipid digestion start from the mouth. In the stomach, the pepsin attacks the peptide bonds of large molecules, breaking down proteins into smaller chains of amino acids, termed polypeptides. The next stage of protein digestion relies on several pancreatic proteases: trypsin, carboxypeptidase, elastase, aminopeptidase, etc. Trypsin. Trypsin is a major protease present in the pancreatic juice. To avoid auto-digestion and damage to the pancreatic acini and the duct, it is initially secreted as the inactive precursor or zymogen, the trypsinogen. Once in the duodenal lumen, trypsinogen is converted into trypsin by the action of the enzyme enteropeptidase or enterokinase. So enterokinase acts on trypsinogen and make it the active trypsin is released. Once in the duodenal lumen, so trypsin is released. Trypsin then catalyzes the activation of other pancreatic zymogens into their active forms. That is, chymotrypsin, elastase, and carboxypeptidase are activated by trypsin. Then carboxypeptidase is an exopeptidase because it catalyzes the removal of single amino acid from the carboxy end. So it is acting on the end of the protein molecule. That is why it's called exopeptidase. So gradually reducing its length. So at one time, only one amino acid is removed from the carboxypeptidase carboxyl end. Then next day, the next amino acid is removed. Next day, the next one is removed. So gradually reducing the length. trypsin, chymotrypsin, and elastase. These are all endopeptidases. So they act on peptide bond at the inside of the protein molecule, at the central portions of the proteins and polypeptides. This results in the generation of smaller chain amino acids called peptides, which are subsequently digested in the jejunum and ileum by the action of intestinal peptides. The dietary reference intake of protein is around 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So protein digestion starts in the stomach and finishes in the intestine. As shown above, 3 enzymes are important for protein digestion, that is pepsin, trypsin, and chymotrypsin. The acidic environment in the stomach denatures protein and makes them available for proteolytic digestion. Pepsin is the major proteolytic enzyme in stomach, where it converts large proteins into smaller peptides. The partially digested peptides enter the small intestine, where they are further degraded by activated trypsin and chymotrypsin. Protein digestion can be further enhanced by proteases such as aminopeptidases. Aminopeptidases can digest proteins from the amino terminus and form single amino acids or di or tripeptides. So the aminopeptides, so if it is acting here, it will release one amino acid. If it is acting at the bond between the second and third amino acid, it will release a dipeptide. If the aminopeptide is acting on the bond between third and fourth amino acid, it will release a tripeptide. Then the pancreatic nucleases. The pancreatic secretion also contain nucleic RNases and DNases that break down RNA and DNA molecules, which can be absorbed and utilized for the synthesis of RNA and DNA in human body. Then absorption in the intestine. The duodenum accomplishes a good deal of nutrient absorption. The main function of the jejunum and ileum is to finish chemical digestion and absorb these nutrients along with water and vitamins. The rings of smooth muscles in the wall of the intestine contracts repeatedly and relax in a process called segmentation. This moves the intestinal content back and forth, and also it brings the chyme closer to the mucosal wall of the intestine. Each day, approximately 8 liters of water, that is water that we drink, as well as the different secretions like saliva, gastric secretion, pancreatic secretion, liver secretion, etc. 8 liters of water, several hundred grams of carbohydrates, 50 to 100 grams of amino acids, 50 to 100 grams of salt ions pass through the wall of the small intestine and into the blood. The transport of nutrients across the membranes of the intestinal epithelial cells into the villi, then into the blood capillaries or lacteals, occurs either passively or actively. Passive transport requires no energy and involves the diffusion of simple molecules along a concentration gradient. Movement from an area where they are in high concentration to an area where there is lower concentration. Here, the higher concentration in the lumen of the intestine, lower concentration in the blood. Water and some vitamins can also cross the gut wall passively. Active transport requires energy to pull molecules out of the intestinal lumen against a concentration gradient. In addition, certain molecules such as glucose, amino acids, and vitamin B12 have their own carriers or transporters which help in their absorption. They use a piggybacking across the gut wall into the bloodstream. So there is a sodium and glucose are co-transported using a sodium glucose co-transport. So, and sodium is absorbed along with glucose. So specifically carbohydrate absorption. Digested carbohydrates enter the blood capillaries, irrigating each villus. So the villus contain a lot of blood supply. So the carbohydrates entering into the blood supply. Almost all ingested carbohydrates are absorbed as monosaccharide, and 80% of these monosaccharides are glucose. Glucose is actively absorbed via Conn's transport mechanism with sodium using a carrier. Other absorbable monosaccharides include galactose from milk and fructose from fruit. So this transporter present on the wall is responsible for sodium dependent sugar transport, which drives this transport of glucose and galactose against concentration gradient. Even if it is against the concentration gradient, this can happen because it is aided. This is a facilitated transport. This is facilitated by the electrochemical gradient of the sodium. The sodium will be in higher concentration in the intestinal lumen, lesser in the cell, mucosal cells. As a result, sodium will move towards the interior. Along with that, through the transporter, glucose also moving. So this is absorbed in a 2:1 ratio. When 2 molecules of sodium is absorbed, 1 molecule of glucose is absorbed. Along with this, 260 molecules of water is also absorbed. So when a glucose molecule is absorbed, 260 molecules of water is absorbed. This is the principle applied in oral rehydration powder. So this is the molar basis of the oral rehydration therapy, aimed to control mortality associated with cholera and diarrhea. Fructose is transported across the brush border membrane by a facilitated diffusion process. There are different types of receptors, transporters, that is GLUT1, GLUT2, etc. The fructose is transported by GLUT5. Fructose is also transported by GLUT2 across the basolateral membrane. Then amino acids, they also use a similar process using a carrier, using a co-transport mechanism. Most products of protein digestion are absorbed through an active co-transport mechanism with the sodium ions and enter the blood capillary system of each villi. They then travel to the liver via the hepatic portal vein. Absorption of amino acid is mainly carried out by intestinal epithelial cells through active transport. These intestinal epithelial cells are highly polarized. Two ends are different in their charges and function. With the apical plasma membrane facing the intestinal lumen. Because there are different types of transporters localized in either apical or basolateral membrane. So the transporters are there. They help in the absorption along with the sodium. Here also, the basal membrane also transporters are there that help in the movement of amino acid from the cell into the capillaries. So there single transport is only in one direction. Then fats. Fat absorption is also help of the bile salts. Digested fat mingle with bile salts, which ferry them to the mucosa where they are coated with lipoproteins and aggregated into small molecules called chylomicrons. Which are taken into the central lacteal of villi. Goes to the central lacteal of the villi. They travel with the lymph to the thoracic duct, where they enter the blood supply. If there is malabsorption of fats, if fat is not fully absorbed from the intestine, this will move to the large intestine, where they form pale, oily, foul-smelling stew. It's called steatorrhea. When that happens, certain fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K may also will not be absorbed properly and they are lost. So it leads to deficiencies. Then vitamin B complex, as I said before, vitamin B complex There are around 8 vitamin B complexes. These 8 vitamins are B1 or thiamine, B2 or riboflavin, B3 or niacin, B5 or pantothenic acid, B6 or pyridoxine, B7 biotin, B9 folate, and B12 cobalamin. Vitamin B12 is first bound to dietary particles. They are ingested in the acidic atmosphere in the stomach, separate them from the nutritional parts. In the duodenum, it binds with intrinsic factor. In the duodenum, it binds with intrinsic. Here it is released from the dietary particles. In the duodenum, it binds with the intrinsic particles. That factor is produced by the gastric parietal cells. It is only in that bound form it can be absorbed. So without binding to the intrinsic particle, this cannot be absorbed. And this intrinsic particle is produced by the parietal cells. If there is something happens to the parietal cell, this intrinsic factor will not be synthesized and vitamin B12 cannot be absorbed. Absorption occurs in the terminal portion of the ileum, where vitamin B12 attaches to specific membrane receptors located on absorptive cells, that is enterocytes. So the receptors on the enterocytes, the B12 bind with that at the bottom of the pits between the microvilli. So the microvilli here, there's another microvilli at the bottom. These receptors are there. To leave the enterocytes and enter the bloodstream, the vitamin must then bind to a carrier protein, transcobalamin 2. So once inside the cell, they bind with transcobalamin 2 and move out of the cell into the blood. Without this, they cannot move out of the cell and enter the blood. A common cause of vitamin B deficiency is the destruction of parietal cells, because it is not producing the intrinsic factor and then it cannot be absorbed. So absorption of carbohydrate, lipids, proteins, minerals and vitamins have okay, then this food will move into the large intestine. Digestive activity in the stomach provokes the gastrointestinal reflex, which stimulates peristalsis to push content along the ileum and the colon. The reflex ensures that the content of one meal is completely emptied from both the stomach and the small intestine before the next meal is eaten. It can take up to 5 hours for all chyme to leave the small intestine. When most of the chyme has been absorbed, the wall of the small intestine becomes less distended and segmentation gives way to peristalsis. So first the segmentation is there in the small intestine to mix the food and bring the food near to the mucous membrane for absorption. Once most of the food is absorbed, this segmentation movement changes to peristalsis, which helps move the unabsorbed matter along towards the large intestine. Peristalsis works a little like squeezing toothpaste out of the tube. With each repeated peristaltic contraction, chyme and waste slowly move down the small intestine. When motility in the ileum increases, the ileocecal wall reflex occurs and it will be opened. And the food is the undigested and unabsorbed part is moved into the cecum. There is a lot of bacteria in the large intestine. It houses around 700 species of bacteria. It's a wide variety of bacteria and they have got different functions. Some are beneficial, some are harmful. This is the largest bacterial ecosystem in the human body in the large intestine. So, and the bacteria produces a lot of products. Some of the products are absorbed by the large intestine. So these are bifidobacteria. They help to regulate other bacteria. So because they produce certain antibodies and it regulates the other bacteria. Modulate the immune response by the production of these antibodies. Prevents tumor formation and they produce certain vitamins also. E. coli, there are several types involved in the production of vitamin K2 needed for the blood coagulation. Keep bad bacteria in check. Some of the E. coli are harmful. Lactobacilli, beneficial varieties, produce vitamins and nutrients, boost immunity and protect against carcinogens. So these are the bacteria enter our colon through the yogurt, sort of fermented food. Then Campylobacter, infection through contaminated food. Enterococcus fecalis, common cause of post-surgical infection. So it's a harmful one. These are the harmful ones. Clostridium difficile, most harmful, especially after antibiotic use, because when all the other bacteria are killed by antibiotics, they become very large in number and is harmful. Bacteroids, beneficial and harmful. When they are in the guts, they are not much harmful, but once they come out of the gut, they tend to be pathogenic. So this shows a summary of the process in the digestive tract. So stomach on the mouth, mechanical digestion and chewing and swallowing, chemical digestion by amylase and lipase. Then there is no digestion. Then in the stomach, mechanical digestion by peristalsis, mixing and propulsion of food in the small intestine. Then chemical digestion of carbohydrates, proteins and fats, especially at the fundus. Absorption of water, lipid-soluble substances, alcohol, aspirin. Then in small intestine, mechanical digestion, mixing and propulsion by segmentation, chemical digestion of fats, polypeptides, nucleic acids, absorption of peptides, amino acids, glucose, fructose, fats, minerals, vitamins, and water. Large intestine, sort of mechanical digestion by segmental mixing, then the propulsion of the food, chemical digestion by bacterial action, absorption of water, ions, minerals, vitamins, organic molecules. Then the rectum, temporary storage of undigested and unabsorbed food material. And once it is food, it will be thrown out through the anal opening. Thank you.